Welcome back, everyone. Today we're going to discuss everything offshore and going global together with Liberty. As a reminder, this is our 5 Things series where we cover some practical issues and some practical concerns and ideas on practical examples of how clients and investors who may want to consider going offshore. There's an interesting topic today. We're going to talk about the expat athlete. It's quite a niche market, but certainly a growing trend in South Africa. Do you have a child that dreams of playing in the English Premier League football? Do you have a child that has aspirations to maybe play rugby around the world? There are some considerations that need to be made. But I think the opportunity here is that the world has become a smaller place, as we've been talking about now over the many sessions that we've had online. And there certainly are advantages, but there are certainly considerations that need to be made. And again in studio, we've got Brandon. Welcome, Brandon. We're going to talk about this niche lifestyle, and we're going to talk about opportunities for kids and maybe even adults going overseas and actually following their dreams. So talk to me a little bit about this trend and what you see and how there are opportunities available for South Africans currently.
Thanks, Famida. This trend, as you call it, is one that's becoming very common in South Africa. And the concept of this expat athlete, as you call it, is a younger individual generally. So let's call it a school-going individual who takes sport a bit more seriously than a hobby, right? This is something that you plan on becoming your profession one day. And it does take a family unit. So you would see parents being heavily involved. You would see coaches from your schooling system, principals, etc., being heavily involved. But it's about getting that young individual to a place where they can achieve their dreams, right? Now, the type of sport that we talk about here could vary. I mean, you used a few examples in there, but I mean, the specific sport is not important, I suppose. It's the concept of how do we get this young individual in a place to be recognized by the scouts and agents out there to go onto a path that eventually takes them to living their dream and playing sport abroad.
That actually is really interesting, and it certainly helps the youth in this country garner a lot of hope, other than being getting exposed to different geographies across the world, but also different opportunities and opportunities that may not exist in South Africa. And just talking about those opportunities, I mean, one of the things that I guess we should consider is that there are different levels of experience. And so maybe the opportunity set is a little bit wider than one initially anticipates.
Sure. So from what you're saying, I'm interpreting that not everyone may end up being the superstar.
Absolutely.
So there are benefits beyond just ending up the superstar who plays abroad, right? Getting the cultural experience of going abroad will stand you in good stead. Getting a scholarship to study abroad means that you could use sport as a springboard towards your academic qualifications of choice. I mean, while you're abroad, you're building up this international network now. You're conversing with people of different races and religions, and having that cultural experience to me is a really strong point. And I suppose that's what you're talking about when you say beyond the sport, I suppose. Having this opportunity and having people go abroad to play sport gives them so much more.
Where would you start? I mean, where would ordinary South African who might be interested in an opportunity like this find an opportunity? Would it be through special agencies, or how does it work?
So generally, you have scouts, right? And if it's a good enough scout, they find you. You don't need to find them. I'm just kidding. So scouts are available, and they would generally be associated with schools, with your local clubs. You'd find them at provincial tournaments. So that would be where you'd interact with these people. But let's imagine this. You're talking about a young adult here most of the time, right? Or a kid who's in school. Now, would you have confidence at that age to go and speak to an agent or to go and speak to a scout?
Yes.
Probably not. So that's where you need a support structure. You need the family unit. You need your parents. You need the coach. You need your principal to help you to have these conversations with these scouts, with these agents, and express your interest, to show your talent. And if you're at an event and perhaps it's not your best day, I mean, that to get a second opportunity with a scout is where I think that support structure can be really important. And I keep talking about the support structure because I don't want to downplay how important this is, because for a young adult, it's not just playing a sport. It's the training sessions that go into it.
Yes.
It's the equipment that needs to be purchased in order for you to perform at your best. So, I mean, there is a financial implication to it, right? And that support structure would need support of their own. And that's where I suppose a financial advisor, having these conversations with the parent to assist them in understanding, look, this is the type of money you're looking at when you're talking about taking your hobby, making it a profession, and really taking your child to the next level.
No, absolutely. I think, as you point out, there's an ecosystem that's involved. Other than the scouts, one would need certainly a lot of financial planning help in order to actually make these dreams a reality for their kids. Not everyone's lucky enough to have sponsorships, but certainly, there are opportunities out there that's ripe for the picking. So now, if we switch gears and we consider these youngsters maybe get opportunities overseas and they travel from country to country, they earn in different currencies, but they are still citizens of South Africa. It invites some complexity as it relates to how do they manage that money, what are the implications of actually earning in different currencies and bringing it back to South Africa, even if they decide to bring it back to South Africa relatively infrequently. Some comments on that?
Sure, and we would have covered this partly in some of the series prior, right? So if we're still talking about people who are still South African resident, they would need to pay tax on their worldwide receipts and accrual. So whether they're earning income across the various soccer leagues of Europe, that would need to be declared. And depending on the individual jurisdictions you're dealing with, potential double tax agreements in place, etc., all of it to me leads you towards having an expert in the field. So having an international tax consultant available to you would make all the sense in the world. And I want to say again that now that you are earning abroad, a financial advisor becomes really important to you, because unfortunately there are many riches to rag stories, if I can call it that, where these youngsters have been given the opportunity, they've gone abroad, they've earned a lot of money, more money than they would have ever thought possible. They live a lifestyle that's perhaps not the greatest, and then beyond the sport. Now, let's remember, sport is a limited career, right?
Yes.
So beyond the sport, they haven't catered for that planning enough. And unfortunately, when reality bites and they go through the ages, you see a lot of them end up destitute. So I just want us to have a small eye on that as we have talk about this topic.
Yeah, I think the tenor of this career is certainly very limited. And the earning potential, even though high, certainly does have a very finite term. And that is actually a very important consideration. Thank you, Brandon. And a lot of us, might be good with numbers, but certainly not financially astute. One of the things we spoke about in our previous series was the cost of living. We spoke about the inflationary environment. We spoke about the inflationary environment in South Africa, but also, just the cost of living overseas and how much more it costs to live overseas than it does relative to the average South African. To the point around our clients looking for financial advisors and help. Do you think this is an important enough consideration to keep at hand when you're considering, moving from place to place? I imagine, somebody like a financial advisor in that scenario would also be very helpful, in terms of your day-to-day management of your money.
No, absolutely. You talk about moving from place to place. We talk about earning in different currencies. You talk about cost of living in these various currencies. That tells me you've got an ever-changing budget, right? So the most basic and simple tool in financial planning, we talk about a budget. That's changing literally based on where you are at any moment in time and given your circumstances. So absolutely, I think having the support of a financial advisor on that journey and doing some of your own research, into the cost of living in various jurisdictions, into the cost of what is specific to your profession. The equipment you use in football might be very different from the equipment you use in cricket, just as a simple example, I suppose. And nutrition and taking care of your nutrition in places across the world sometimes leads to private chefs and things like that being used. So I think all of those considerations need to be taken into account, and I could not agree with you more that a financial advisor would be case in point.
Thank you for that. And what about life beyond sport? We spoke about the limited tenor. We spoke about the opportunity to be more financially prudent so that, your money can last you over a longer term. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, hopefully this is something that more and more of our young athletes are considering. I see a lot of sports clubs actually having financial education programs with their athletes, because I think this has proven to be a massive stumbling block. I mentioned previously about the riches to rag stories, but life beyond sport should be a consideration for every single person getting into sport. Because as you mentioned, your physical ability has got, X period of time, and then you need to consider what do you do beyond it. So do you use the time while you're in sport to study part-time and perhaps enhance academically and then try and transition into that type of field after sport? Do you do the most obvious thing that most retired sports people do, which is become a coach or go into commentary? Do you use the accumulation of wealth to start up a passion project or a business that you've always wanted to do? All of these are considerations that you would naturally have. And all of these, to me, would require some input or some level-mindedness coming from your sounding board, your financial advisor, as you've called it. So I do think that it's an important consideration and one that hopefully our young athletes are really taking to heart.
Thank you so much, Brandon. And thank you, audience, for another exciting session with Brandon today. How amazing are opportunities? The world has got so many opportunities that we can take advantage of now that potentially in the past seemed like pipe dreams. We can now offer opportunities to the youth out there that potentially they couldn't have expressed any desire or inclination to even want to achieve, in the past. And, we spoke a lot about what are the opportunities for going offshore, but also some of the financial considerations. And these are important considerations because we've got to think about the enablers. And those enablers are sometimes, topics that are not easy to have, but they're important topics to consider as it relates to setting up the youth for success, but also for sustained financial success through their careers and even after. Thank you once again for joining us today with Liberty in our Going Global series. It really has been fantastic having Brandon in studio and talking to you, and I'm really looking forward to the next session. Thank you.